Welcome, welcome, friends. It is Sunday, August the 17th. This is a special edition of Hurricane Hub Alive. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandages, and tonight on HHL, it's going to be an Erin-centric stream. But at the end, we're going to touch on a brand new wave that came off the coast of Africa that's got growing potential to become our next named storm. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're going to focus mostly on Erin tonight, and it's making another run at re-intensifying. Now, as you remember, yesterday it was a Category 5, headline news everywhere. Now, in the last 24 hours since it hit that peak, it has come down, still a major hurricane, Category 3 at this hour. But indications, looking at satellite imagery, which we'll go through together in just a couple of minutes, you'll see that it is certainly starting to show signs that it is re-intensifying, and it is explicitly forecast to do so here in the short term from the National Hurricane Center's most recent cone that came out at 5 o'clock. We did just get an update at 8 o'clock, an intermediate advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Now, the forecast overall, I want to stress this, it remains on track. The center of Erin will not make a landfall in the U.S., but that has been very, very over-communicated, right? However, what's been kind of lost on that is the size in which Erin will expand to as it gains latitude will still impact the United States. Indirectly, we're talking heavy surf, large surf, really. We're going to have 10 to 15-foot waves along the U.S. eastern seaboard, rip current risk, coastal erosion, tidal flooding. Areas most in line to see this is going to be the far eastern part of North Carolina. The Outer Banks that jut out into the Atlantic. They'll be closest to the center of Erin when it makes its closest approach. That'll be Wednesday night into Thursday. So there's still a lot of time to watch this. And you're probably asking yourself, can this still change? Yes. Will it change? Most likely. Models have been trending ticks and ticks and ticks farther to the west. Is it going to tick all the way to the west that we see landfall? I don't think so. I think once it turns to the north, it's staying offshore. That's not a threat for a landfall, but it may come a little bit closer, increasing the swell sizes, increasing the gusty winds that we may see along the immediate coastline. But that looks to be about it, so keep that in mind. And then, as I mentioned, a new wave with growing development odds. In fact, at 8 o'clock, it did jump to a moderate chance of developing into the next named storm, which would be Fernand. Let's take a second to go back and look at Erin and the remarkable intensification process it underwent. Started on Friday night and peaked, as you know, at 11:20 a.m. when it got that tick up to a Category 5 hurricane. The first of 2025, obviously. I think it was the first since, what was the last Cat 5? Milton last year in 2024. So check this out. Friday, we were a Category 1 hurricane, 75-mile-per-hour winds. The 11 a.m. advisory came out. It became a hurricane on Friday, 75-mile-per-hour winds. 24 hours later, 11:20 a.m., the special advisory came out from the Hurricane Center. Hurricane hunters in the storm found evidence to upgrade it to a Category 5. It peaked, and then it came back down. Now, sometimes when we get these rapidly intensifying storms, which it did, it 2x'd the definition of rapid intensification, which we'll talk about in just a minute. When we get a rapidly intensifying storm, it's just not sustainable to keep that intensity going, and it undergoes something called an eyewall replacement cycle, which you'll clearly see here on satellite when we go back 24 hours and see it. And that leads to a period of weakening and then leads to a larger, more intense storm with a re-intensification phase just after that. All right, Erin's rapid intensification goes like this. So at 11 a.m. Friday, 75-mile-per-hour winds. We jumped to 8 p.m. Friday, 85. So not much intensification throughout the day on Friday. 85-mile-per-hour winds, Cat 1. 11 a.m. Saturday morning, we're up to a Category 5, 160-mile-per-hour winds. We had a jump of 75 miles per hour in less than 24 hours, in about 18 hours here, and a drop in central pressure of 65 millibars. Now, the definition of rapid intensification is 35 miles per hour increase in 24 hours. So we 2x'd that, and there's no real definition for the amount of pressure drop, but 65 millibars is a huge deepening of a storm, intensification of it. And, it's not all that uncommon anymore. Roughly 33% or a third of all storms undergo rapid intensification at some point in their lifespan. And most Category 4 and 5 storms see this type of intensification here. And we saw it numerous times last season, the season before that. So it's becoming much more common, but it's just amazing to see when it plays out, especially when it's over the open waters and it's not like rapidly intensifying leading up to a landfall or something like that. So currently we're sitting at 125 mile per hour winds. Again, intensification is expected here in the next 24. By tomorrow night, we're back up to a Cat 4, 145 mile per hour winds, and then it will slowly start to tick back down, dropping categories as we get towards the end of the week. And this is as it's turning north and passing in between Bermuda to the west and the East Coast to the east. So we'll see a little bump in intensification here. Could it overperform like it did? Certainly. It's actually moving into even warmer waters than where it was when it underwent that explosive intensification. So here's Erin, 8 o'clock advisory here on the top of your screen, 125 mile per hour winds, gust to 155, moving west-northwest. That's also a change. We're going to look at the track here because it made a lot of folks nervous when it started to tick southwestwards and then westwards for longer. So it's had a wobbly track the last 24 or so, but it's maintaining a west-northwest. Very important. It has that northerly component to it, and it has slowed down. When we last spoke on Friday, we had a forward movement of 19 miles per hour. Now we're down to 13. So it's a slowing system, but as it begins to get tugged to the north, it will pick up forward momentum. And you'll see that kind of the ticks between the forecasts get larger, indicating a faster forward movement. So right now, right at a high-end Category 3, 125 mile per hour winds, the Saffir-Simpson scale here, how we grade hurricanes based on the wind speed. Again, it maxed out at 160, so we were over that 157 mile per hour threshold. So it's 157 pretty much to infinity. There is no such thing as a Category 6. Satellite imagery here clearly shows an eye warming and clearing in the last couple of frames here, indicating the eyewall replacement cycle has been completed. It's been completed for a while now. It's just taking a little longer for that secondary eyewall to reappear, clear out, and warm. And then we're seeing the convection just wrapping all around the core, almost fortifying it and maintaining an intensity. Likely we'll have a jump here at 11 o'clock. So here's that track over the last couple of days. So it was maintaining a west-northwest trend here on Friday, and then it started to move a little bit westerly, and then it ticked southwest, okay? This is right before it had rapidly intensified to a Cat 5. You can see that purple shading here on the track. That's the Category 5, and then it was moving west pretty much, and then it started to gain some latitude. And you can see the latitude here. On Friday, that was around 18 degrees north, so we have gained a significant amount of latitude here, and it's trending west-northwest right now as a Category 3. Now, this is a 24-hour satellite loop. Okay, I'm going to wait for it to play out again one more time so you can kind of see when it was the strongest. When it had its eye clear on out here and warm, and it was a pinhole eye. That is a key characteristic of a very intense hurricane. It was a Category 5 at that point. And then it just couldn't sustain itself. That inner eye wall collapsed. You see it cloud up there. It disappears. And we kind of wobbled along there, and now here's that secondary eye wall beginning to reappear on satellite imagery, and it's warming and clearing on out, and eventually we'll see that look a lot more visible in probably the next hour worth of loops here. So it's really kind of made some headway over the last couple of hours. There's a close-up loop. Look at this intensification here, this convective banding that's completely wrapping around. By the way, this is the eye wall here, so you're going to be finding the strongest of the winds east and northeast of that storm center based on its track. So really this side here is where you're going to be finding the strongest of the winds based on its trajectory. And we're going to look at some buoys here because that's really the only ground readings we're getting of wind speeds, and we're seeing some massive waves generated by this as well in some buoys located just to the north of where Erin currently is. We'll give it a second here. Sometimes the visible satellite imagery struggles to pop on here, but of course the sun has gone down. We can't really see too much here, but it is certainly impressive on the infrared satellite imagery. By the way, why it's important, why I like to show the infrared satellite imagery rather than just a visible all the time is because this gauges the temperatures of the cloud tops. Why that's important is the colder the cloud tops, the stronger the convection is, and the colder cloud tops are indicated by the shades of black and white here, and even the pink that you saw in the couple images before. that's completely surrounding that eyewall and fortifying it. That's where you're finding the strongest of the winds and the strongest of the storm overall, the most energy created there. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are out in the storm still. They've really been out in it. You got to hand it to them. They are doing a fantastic job getting us all of this data from in the storm, plugging it into the computer models. They've been running nearly endless missions. I think they're on mission number 18 or 19 at this time. They rebased out to St. Croix on Wednesday, and they started running missions into the storm on Thursday. So this is day 4 of like 12-hour missions. They're going into the storm and just going back and forth and making passes and getting information for us. So this is the most recent one. They're out there right now. It looks like they're heading back over to St. Croix to wrap it up, and it will be replaced by either another NOAA aircraft or a U.S. Air Force Reserve aircraft here to keep on going through the storm and giving us more information. I mentioned that it's not even in the warmest ocean waters yet, okay? It went through that bout of rapid intensification, Cat 1 and Cat 5, over waters that, 81, 82, warm, certainly, deep warm water, certainly. But look where it's tracking. It's moving north into an area that's undergoing a marine heat wave. We've got sea surface temperatures in that purplish, pinkish color there, 85, 86, 87 degrees. Pretty large area of it, too, and it tracks right through it. So it'll be interesting to see once this gets back up to a Cat 4 if it can maintain its overall intensity. Now, warm sea surface temperatures are not the only thing that helps a storm become intense. You need upper level features to be favorable as well. Now, the thinking I think here is as it gets to as it moves north, we're going to start to see some wind shear working on it, especially as it gets pretty much the same latitude as Bermuda, as it begins to get picked up by this upper level low and drifting off to the north and east. So that should help to tilt the storm a little bit, so it won't be able to take full advantage of really the jet fuel sea surface temperature environment that it will be working on through here. So that's going to be something interesting to watch there. Also, it's deep water. The ocean heat content is very, very suitable for a major hurricane, especially where it passed through here. Notice this kind of little dip here where the ocean heat content isn't as significant as it was, despite the ocean surface temperatures being very, very suitable and conducive for rapid intensification there. The reason why these two, you need them both in line, is because when you get a very volatile storm like that, you get a lot of mixing of the ocean waters. It's generating very large waves. That's mixing up the ocean water, something called upwelling, and that's going to upwell, mix up cooler waters from a depth. So when you only have the warm waters on the skin of the ocean in this particular area here, I mean, it may extend down a couple dozen feet or so, but you're going to be mixing up the waters there, and you're going to be kind of depleting that ocean heat content in those areas on its forecast track there. So that's an interesting little development. All right, here's the track. The 5 o'clock track from the National Hurricane Center. Again, they do expect intensification here in the short term by Monday afternoon. We're back up to a higher end Category 4 hurricane here, 145-mile-per-hour winds, and then it's moving almost due north at that point. Now, between now and tomorrow afternoon, could this jog farther to the west? Yeah, it's a possibility, but it's still going to be taking that turn to the north and then north and east. What's going to be saving the East Coast here is this upper level low coming in from the north and west that's going to be pushing on out to sea here to the east and northeast, even wrapping around Bermuda is right around here. So it's going to be wrapping around Bermuda, and Bermuda will be on the east side of the storm, which is typically the worst side, the dirty side of the storm, but I think the center is going to be far enough away from Bermuda, far enough away from the eastern seaboard that the core of Erin's strongest winds will stay over the open Atlantic. Great news. Tropical storm force winds still likely, possible likely on the U.S. East Coast, and even some tropical storm force winds likely in Bermuda as well. But we wouldn't be talking about hurricane force winds either. All right, the NHC advisory schedule here. Now that we've got the aircraft in the storm all the time, we're getting 8 advisories a day, 4 intermediate, 4 full advisories here. So we just came off the 8 p.m. advisory with the intermediate update, watches and warnings that are out, and storm details and location, things like that. If there are any changes that need to happen with the forecast track, the cone, that'll come out and be published at 11 o'clock. All right, how are the models doing on this thing now? Days ago, we had large deviation in the longer range, okay? Where the cone gets wider at the tail end, that's because uncertainty is higher. Look at how much more agreement there is now on the spaghetti plots. Each line is a different computer model. There's a lot of agreement here, especially in a part of the forecast when you should have much more spread. You don't. That's good. And notice all of these are all the hurricane models falling in line with the hurricane cone. in the projection here. Takes it, there's Bermuda, takes it to the northwest of Bermuda, and then to the north and east and out to sea, clearly east of the eastern seaboard. Now, how about the Euro and the American? The ensembles. To refresh your memory, what we're looking at here is ensemble members for both models, which is basically the Euro or the GFS run dozens of times in some cases, and we just tweak the variables slightly to get a slightly different outcome. So a tweak early on can have a big implication in the longer range, which is why we get more of a spread in the long range. But even these are falling in line. We're seeing a lot of agreement here with both the GFS and American, all the ensembles kind of telling the same picture. Off to the west-northwest, then due north, and then northeast, zipping on out to sea there. Are there a few ensemble members that say, yeah, I don't think I want to fall in line with this? Sure. There's a few, GFS and Euro, that are just outside to the east here, favoring more of an easterly trajectory, a turn north sooner. And then there are a few, it looks to be just a couple Euro ensembles here in the red, maybe one GFS ensemble member just outside of the far western extent of that cone that favor a little bit more of a westward push here, which has been the trend on the model, on the actual storm itself. It's been tracking farther to the west than anticipated. So these models might be onto something. And if that was to be what verifies if the storm does track along the far western periphery of the cone, remember, the cone here doesn't mean that it is set within those bounds. It will not go out. This is where the center of the storm will track 2/3 of the time. So a whole third of the time it tracks outside of that. So it's certainly a possibility we see it on the western fringe or just outside of that cone. But I tell you, cone forecasting has gotten a whole lot better over the last decade or so. So most likely it falls right in line here in that cone moving to the north. Now, there are a few tropical warnings out. I mean, not many areas because not much land is being affected by this, which is the best part. Tropical storm warnings here for the Turks and Caicos because the storm, Erin's like right over here now. So we are seeing tropical storm force winds there to the Crooked Island, Inagua Islands, and Abraham's Bay over here. And then you get over to the Bahamas. They are not under any sort of tropical storm watches or more imminently a tropical storm warning. So that's the good news. Now let's look at the operational runs of both the European and the American. Great agreement. Right now, obviously, that's exactly where the storm is. We are not too far north from the Dominican Republic and Haiti, only about 150 miles to the north. Now, you may be looking at that and say, well, they must be getting slammed. Well, you're going to find the strongest of the winds staying to the north and east of where that center is, okay? So you are getting some windy conditions here. But again, the worst of the storm is going to be on the eastern side, the dirty side of the storm. And since it's tracking to the west-northwest, that is staying away from land. Going farther out in time, we'll jump through Monday, Tuesday. Great agreement here. European and GFS pretty much right on top of each other. And I'm going to stop it here on Thursday. I think this is when the storm makes its closest pass to the United States. And that closest territory is going to be the Dare County, Outer Banks of North Carolina. Got the Euro that slightly favors a westerly track. GFS that slightly favors an easterly track. Both showing, I don't know if you noticed this as it played out, the storm expanded as it gained latitude. Its wind field will expand. So the center clearly way away from land, probably 250, 300 miles off to the east-southeast of the Outer Banks. But the wind field will certainly expand out here. So tropical storm force winds, maybe wind gusts up and over 45, 50, maybe 55. Most likely location of that happening will be along the Outer Banks of the United States, of North Carolina. So here we are Thursday. Likely this passes late Wednesday into Thursday. And then it begins to move almost due east, not looking like it's going to come any closer to, say, places like Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, and heading out even south of Atlantic Canada. Now, Hurricane Center puts out their own kind of wind radii here. And this is the forecast for as we get out to Thursday morning. What you're looking at here is the yellow lobe is going to be tropical storm force winds, the extent of those, 39 miles per hour or greater. The orange is just going to be 55 mile per hour wind gusts or greater. And then the red is going to be where you're finding the extent of hurricane force winds, which is a very, very small area that will stay well away from any land at all. Even the 55 mile per hour swath staying well far away from land. And even the tropical storm force winds, as indicated from the Hurricane Center, does not extend over land here. However, modeling does extend it. I'm going to show you the European here. Same kind of thing, same lobe of wind speeds, right? So we're finding the orange, we're going to find Category 3 wind speeds, very close to the center of Erin. The yellow is going to be Cat 2, green is going to be Cat say 75-mile-per-hour winds or more. And then this blue that extends out kind of in all directions is going to be tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour or greater. Got a few plots here on the eastern seaboard. At Thursday at 7 a.m., we'd be seeing the strongest of the gusts potentially out by Cape Hatteras, Dare County, which, by the way, Dare County is under state of emergency. They've issued mandatory evacuations of Hatteras Island because of the winds, the tidal surf, coastal surge, that kind of thing. So strongest of the winds there. Say this jogs a little bit farther to the west, say 10, 15, 20 miles even. That would mean we'd probably see slightly higher wind gusts. We'd probably see slightly larger waves propagating and hitting the coastline of the Outer Banks as we get into later this week. But wind speeds right there look to be pretty much in line with 30 to 50 miles per hour from Virginia Beach down through the Outer Banks. And then we even get a close pass here of some tropical storm force winds heading up towards Nantucket, over towards eastern portions of Long Island. Boston, it'll be a breezy day on Friday, but again, this is way to the south and east at that point, and the European takes it clear south of Nova Scotia. Likely this storm will not make a landfall anywhere, which is very rare for a Category 5 storm, or at least a storm that made it at some point in its life to a Category 5, to not make landfall at all. So we're lucky with this one, keeping it offshore. So let's talk about Erin's indirect U.S. impacts. Large swells. This thing is a massive wave generator. We haven't even gotten to that part yet. We'll show you the buoys out there closest to the center. I saw one coming in with 24-foot waves already, and that was 150 miles away from the center. So large swells. As Erin is like right here, all the waves it's generating are going to be propagating out in all directions, hitting up and down the eastern seaboard. So large swells going to lead to coastal erosion, coastal flooding, and then at times of high tide with a persistent east to northeast wind, you're going to have some tidal flooding there. And of course, strong rip currents evident already this weekend are going to extend pretty much from Florida all the way up to Maine at all the beaches there. We're still in summer, so beaches still going to have some massive rip currents to deal with here over the short term. So here's a look at the buoy reports, okay? You see all the buoys that are located near. We've got one that's just to the north of it. And look at this. So this is about 130 miles north of the center of Erin. And look at this, 25-foot waves being reported by that buoy there. And it looks like it's clocking a wind speed of 51 miles per hour. We've got a buoy well to the east there, 14-foot seas. So those waves are propagating out, and they're already hitting these buoys, and they're going to make their way all the way to the eastern seaboard. Let's look at it on modeling here. Here's the swath of the largest of the waves. Same point I'll stop it as it's passing between, say, Hatteras Island and Bermuda. We've got wave generation here, as depicted by the European model, showing maybe the possibility of some waves getting up over 40, 45 feet near the center. Of course, they dissipate slightly, though, as they propagate out. They lose a little bit of their energy. But we're talking 10, 15-foot waves, a good possibility, especially in the southern Outer Banks, hitting the coastline there. And a lot of homes are built very close to the water there. This is going to erode a lot of the beaches and probably lead to some loss of homes in those areas. We lose them in a strong nor'easter. So I wouldn't doubt if we see it with a Category 3 hurricane sitting just a couple hundred miles off to the east there. And then, of course, it moves off to the north and east and gone by that point. So Erin's track history, this has been a very interesting story here, forecasting Erin, because there's been considerable in the days ago, the adjustment was south. And then as we got into the short term, the adjustment has been significantly south and west as the storm has failed to make those movements each time. So look at the adjustment here that's happened closer and closer to the U.S. East Coast. I don't think this trend is going to continue when we get up to like a landfall. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to get that turn north here in the short term, and we'll see it play out exactly as forecast there. How about the cones? The cones have done the same sort of thing, an adjustment south, and then there was an adjustment west-southwest. And then now there seems to be almost a little bit of a nudge farther to the east and then a northeast turn here as it loops on out to sea. It almost mimics that geography of the southeast coast of the United States. It just gets projected on out to sea there. All right, so the bottom line as we get ready to wrap things up here, high confidence Erin will not make a U.S. landfall. Impacts still felt, as we talked about, indirectly, and they may be extensive. There could be extensive coastal flooding and coastal erosion. Rip current risk is there. Tidal flooding could be very high, depending on just how far west it does track. Heavy surf out there, too, and the beach erosion is going to be a real possibility and real problem for a lot of areas down through the Outer Banks. So now let's talk to our final wave, or talk about our final wave here. This is going to be tagged probably in the short term, Invest 99L, investigative area, 90 to 99. So we'll be at the the 99 then will recycle back to 90. But it's this wave here, another tropical wave that emerged off the coast of Africa, much like Erin did. It's at a lower latitude, though, so the projection here is for it to maybe have more of a southerly track. As we get out to the later parts of this week, we could have some tropical development in this area. 40% chance of that happening now within the next 7 days. And that's a big jump. This morning it was at 20%. Now it's up to 40%. So, folks, that's the latest. I really appreciate you tuning in tonight. If you want to find me on social media, if you have any questions, there's all my handles. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. And myself will be back. Myself and Evan Stewart will be back tomorrow and for the rest of the week with more episodes of Hurricane Hub Live as we continue to track Hurricane Erin as it makes that turn north and pretty much just stalks us off the east coast of the United States. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We'll see you back here at 8 p.m. tomorrow night for Hurricane Hub Live.